Just before we move on to what segment should I target, I just wanted to just touch base on what is a useful segmentation. Well, it must be identifiable and measurable. So an organization should be able to identify customers in each segment to measure their characteristics. It should be sustainable. So the segment should be large enough for a firm to serve profitably. And it should be stable enough over a long period of time that any market effort that was deployed in terms of, expense and time was likely to be successful and demonstrate a profit. It needs to be accessible, so a segment needs to be reachable through communication and distribution channels. It needs to be actionable, so it should be able to create products and marketing programs for attracting and serving consumers in the segments that you've identified. And it should, consumers in the segment should have similar needs, which are different from the needs of consumers in other segments. That's the key principle. As I mentioned, there's no pre-prescribed way of segmenting a market. How you segment a market is entirely up to you as a marketer. But what you will notice is that having built the segments, you will start to be able to identify the personas of your target audience, okay, who you might well be targeting. And these are really pulled out of the different segments. And these are just examples in the previous segmentation analysis that I showed you using psychographic. This is an example of how you can build a psychographic profile of your target audience or a persona. And the reason why you do this is to give you an understanding of exactly a rich description of who this group of consumers are. You know, what makes them tick, what benefits are they seeking, what are their attitudes, interests, or values towards a particular product market. And this helps you decide on what your product offering should be, as I mentioned in the last lecture series. Here are a couple of it. There is a video that I would recommend that you watch on iLearn about building segment profiles and building a target audience description. This is an example of what a target audience description can start to look like. Some of them are even longer than these, but these are some good examples. This comes from John Steele, who is quite a famous, wrote a great book called Truth, Lies and Advertising, The Art of Account Planning, for those of you who have an interest in marketing communications. And he gives an example of a target audience description. He talks about the importance of this going in the creative brief so that creatives understand exactly who they are writing their messaging to, but it equally serves to provide the marketer with a clear understanding of what the product offering should be, as well as how you would deploy the marketing mix. So he suggests that Rodeo buyers, Rodeo is a car, he's British by the way, which is why we might not recognize the names. He says, Rodeo buyers see themselves as different. They are cooler, more adventurous, fun, and in the know, and more in the know than most buyers. While they certainly aren't as studied as trooper buyers, they know their stuff and they know what they want. They want their vehicle to be a sort of tool to help act out and express their active lifestyle. These people are doers, so their vehicle has to work. It has to be able to be pushed, and they will push it to the limits. They are people who will want to get their vehicle covered in mud on the very first day that they own it. In another example that I've adapted from a case study in WARC, WARC is the World Advertising Research Centre. It relates to a case study on Puma where they repositioned and they spoke about their target audience, and they described it somewhat like this. Puma enthusiasts are young adults who love to play. This generation were brought up on their own sports, nourished on a diet of Super Mario and football. Their phones, TVs, computers, and even university coursework have been transformed into playing fields. To them, life is a sport, and they're playing it all day, every day. These are athletes who replace Gatorade with beer, protein bars with kebabs, and compression garments with jeans. They are not driven by superior athleticism, and on-field performance. Sport is social, a game of pool or snooker with mates. The trophy isn't encased in bronze, rather a phone number written on a soggy beer coaster shared between friends. There are no lucrative sponsorship deals, no fan clubs. These are the unsung heroes of the night. So this is how they described their segment, which they referred to as the after-hours athletes. So let's look. So we've looked at the purpose of segmentation. We've looked at the mechanisms that we can use to segment a market. We've looked at how out of that segment falls the persona of the segment or segments that we might be targeting, because you might decide to target more than one segment. It might mean that you might have to make variations to your product offering in order to match the needs of both. Not all the time, but sometimes. Let's look at the idea now of which segment should I target. So the next step, having identified how the market is segmented, is to decide which segment I should target. And so it's in this next step, which is targeting, that marketers evaluate each potential segment and decide upon which group of customers they will invest their marketing resources. And selecting the groups or selecting the segments are known as the target markets. If we come back to our previous slide that I opened on, you can see here that we can make a choice. We can choose one or more segments. As I said, if you choose more than one segment, you need to make sure that your product offering appeals to both segments. If it doesn't, you might have to have a variation that might appeal to a different segment. But sometimes you can find a positioning statement that crosses across both of the segments that you might be targeting. In other instances, it's perfectly feasible for you to just target one. Some of the things that you should consider is obviously the buyer behavior, the size of the segment, whether the segment is growing or shrinking, how profitable it is, the strategic fit it has with your product offering, if that is in existence, or your company's strengths to develop a new product offering, whether there are competition already vying for the dollars of customers that reside in that segment. These are all the things that you need to take into consideration as you're starting to think about which segment you should target. Finally, I'm going to leave you with a video that you can watch on choosing attractive market segments. It adds a little bit more science to it. It's the GE McKinsey 9-box matrix, and it looks at, I guess, a more technical way of thinking about how you might choose attractive segments. It suggests that you choose criteria to measure the attractiveness and the competitive position. You weigh the market attractiveness and competitive position factors. You determine a grading grid and you rate the segments on each of the factors. You plot the segments and assess the attractiveness, and you project the future position and make targeting decisions based upon that. So that's one tool that you can use. So I'd encourage you to watch that on iLearn. Next week, we go on to look at the notion of positioning. And positioning is where, having defined how the market is segmented, identified which segment or segments we want to target, and built personas behind those segments that are rich and descriptive, we start to think about what is the core promise that our brand is going to make, and that is referred to as our brand's positioning. Having defined the positioning, we can start to then build the customer value proposition, which is the bundle of benefits, largely inherent in the product itself, but also through distribution, price, and promotion, that actually helps communicate and deliver a product or service that actually fulfills the wants and needs of those that reside in the segments that you have decided to target. Thank you.